There we go. Hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're just going to give it another minute, let folks filter in. Wonderful, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight, folks. I'm Susanna Hermans. I'm co-owner of Oblong Books in New York's Hudson Valley. And tonight we are super psyched to be presenting a conversation with Jennifer Probst for her new novel, The Secret Love Letters of Olivia Moretti. Jennifer is joined tonight by Layne. Layne is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author, more than 36 romantic comedies. Her books have sold over 1 million copies worldwide. And tonight we are here for Jennifer Probst, who is also a New York Times bestselling author. She has written numerous series, including Billionaire Builders, the Searching For series, the Marriage to a Billionaire series. And like some of her characters, she lives in the Hudson Valley, which is where we are based. We're so happy to be one of her local bookstores. I will be dropping some links into the chat as our conversation gets started for you to purchase a signed copy of The Secret Love Letters of Olivia Moretti. And if you have questions for our guests throughout the event, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You should see it there. You can throw a question in there and we'll get to it toward the end of the program. Feel free to, in the chat, tell us where you're Zooming from tonight. We love to see where people are coming from. And I will turn things over to the two of you, Jennifer and Layne. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susanna. Thanks for having us. I'm with one of my favorite people in the world today, so it almost doesn't feel like a signing. It just feels like we get to hang out and talk, and we have some participants with us. So it's so good to see you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to the point that like I was putting my makeup on and it was like a little bit like be Zoom ready, but I'm like, oh, I have to see like, Probst. I haven't seen you in so long. And I didn't want to be like first time being, how it's been. Oh, my hair, I already messed it up. You get the idea.
Because sometimes I think that I make myself presentable for other women and my friends in my life. My husband is like, whatever.
Yeah, it's so true. Even Anthony, my husband was like, oh, he's like, you look nice. I'm like, not for you. It is for Probst. Always for Probst.
It's for me in celebration. And I'm so great. We both have releases. I can't wait to get into the nitty gritty. You know what I loved about my release this year? It was on 2/22/22.
That is exciting.
Isn't that a great date?
It really is.
Yeah, I felt like there was some kind of magic involved.
And I feel like that's one, I don't know if you have like books, because like sometimes when you have, like a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, however many books you have out, they blend together a little bit. And yes. Sometimes it's those little, like I had Crushed years ago. It's not my bestseller, but it came out on my birthday. And I always remember, it just has like this special thing. So I feel like this is going to be, I actually have the cover.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't tell you, like you sent this to me a while ago and I'm so excited to read it, but I've been saving it. Yeah. I'm going to Phoenix tomorrow and this is my pool read. And like, can you imagine a better pool read?
That is so great. And especially you're going to be dodging the bad weather here in the Northeast. We're getting hit by more snow and sleet. So you're going to be going to a nice, dry, warm place.
We are, but so we've talked about this before. So guys, if you don't know, Jennifer Probst and I, we go back a few years, we're friends, we talk about a lot. So she knows already that I am a cold weather person, which I know is odd, but so I've actually been really excited for Arizona. And this is rare for me. I'm like, oh, it's going to be sunny. It's going to be hot. Like maybe I'll get rid of my winter pallor a little bit. But of course the week that we're going there is unseasonably cold. So we're going to land tomorrow and it's 55 degrees in the desert. And I'm like, of course, this is what you get, Layne, for thinking you're a cold weather person.
That's okay. You can take it better than some of the other ones
I'll be ready. I got my sweaters on. I was like, what's weird? I'm like, nope, I'm ready. I got this, my black, my New York.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. So, but tell me, what have you been doing to celebrate release week?
I've been super, under the radar this week, but it's okay. To be honest, we just came back from a little getaway for President's Weekend. Oh. So we went even higher northeast, we went to Maine. We went to Portland, Maine. I was there for like 3 nights. Absolutely gorgeous. I've never been there. It's just like this quirky little artsy town. I'm a lobster fanatic, so the food, it's a real foodie town. We did a lot of food, a lot of drink. Yes, it was freezing cold. It was like 0 degrees. We had, I felt like one of those, the toddlers where they're in the snowsuits with the mittens.
Yeah,
And,
bundled
okay,
up.
so we went like they have a lot of great breweries. So we went like bar hopping, and every time we'd enter a bar, 4 layers would come off of us, you know what I mean? And there's nowhere to put it. And I was just like, I'm exhausted. By like halfway through the first day, I'm like, I'm exhausted from dressing and undressing.
You probably like burn calories, right? Like it's like practically the most exercise I've gotten in a while probably would be like taking off layers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we wanted to take advantage of the town and everything's walkable. So we didn't want to Uber it around. So we just parked our car and we were like, we can handle it. But we just kept stopping at different like breweries and because we were like frozen. So it was kind of funny. I feel like that was more of like my celebration to get away, because that is unlike me. In the winter, I don't go anywhere. So I really haven't been away for like 3 months. Sometimes I feel like the only place I go is to pick up my kids from school. It's like scary. I just really hunker down. I'm a hermit. So it was really nice to be outside in Portland and just be like, oh, I'm talking to people. And and the funniest thing happened, Lauren, you would have died. We went to this foodie kind of a food tour through the cities, and it had wine and everything. And
I'm listening.
somebody recognized me.
No.
She knew my name and she knew my books. And she was with a group of her girlfriends. She was so lovely. She was with a group of her girlfriends, and they were screaming. They were like, this is unbelievable that you're here. And we ended up they're going to read my newest release for their book club. And I'm going to do it with them, which I think is so cute. I mean, you go all the way to Maine, and the idea that they knew me, I'm like, what?
So I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm so happy for you, but I'm also so jealous because it's still on my bucket list. Like, I just want to, like anywhere, like not a book signing, like that's nice too.
Yes.
But, somewhere like outside where someone's like, are you Lauren Layne? And I have like fantasies about it, like how it's going to play out. And like, this is gonna be like reading my book and I'm like, is that her? Or, like, is this you on the back of the cover? And it's like never even come close to happening. So I'm jealous.
That is definitely going to happen. It's just that people don't recognize writers, and she didn't know my face. It was just my name for whatever reason. You know what I mean? We were going back and forth with Instagram, and she'd seen my name. So it was just like this whole big thing. But I think writers are much more incognito.
That makes me feel a little bit better. But I always imagine, like, I mean, that I'm a huge Nora Roberts fan. So I'm like, if I saw Nora Roberts anywhere, like I would be the one, I would have no chill. I'd be like going up to her in the restaurant. Like, can you sign this? Can you sign my bra?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I followed Susan Elizabeth Phillips into the JFK airport, into the bathroom, like in the bathroom.
I would do that
waited by the
her
to wash her hands. And I was mute. I was just staring at her washing her hands. I mean, that's creepy. Like I would be
the same. I would
near her.
Totally like fangirl.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it was really good.
Well, and that's nice too, because like I was gonna ask, like, do you have any like ritual with release day, or are you like me where it like you want to really like celebrate it, but it tends to be a lot of work in a good way?
Yes, I am definitely like you. I used to try to go to dinner or do that. And I mean, I guess it's a good thing, because after like the first dozen or 15 books, it's kind of like, yeah. And then it just kind of like gets saturated with work. So I try not to do anything extra, but it feels like a little bit of like your birthday, because everybody's online congratulating you. So I feel like I'm responding to messages and feeling very blessed that people actually know my book is alive in the world, So that's really most of the day.
It is, yeah. And it's like you all like I try to plan it. I'm like, oh, like we'll go out to like lunch, but it almost feels a little bit like surreal, because especially like we wrote the book.
Yeah.
Like one of the books, like we finished it like a year ago. And every now and then, like you have like early readers and they're like, oh, I love this quote. And you're like, did I write that? You're like, I mean, it sounds great, but yeah, it's almost like a kind of a different mindset shift that has to happen all of a sudden in one release day.
It's so weird, right? Because we wrote it like a year ago, like you said, and we've seen it through edits and stuff. I was on this podcast and they were like, oh, we're going to have some fun and do quotes of your books and you have to guess the books. And I was sweating. I was like, I think I know my
I'm
book.
getting nervous just thinking about it.
Yeah. So a lot of them I got, I was like, okay. And then they did this quote and it was a beautiful quote. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. And I said the wrong book. And she said, Jen, that's your newest release, The Secret Love Letters of Olivia Moretti. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed, but we laughed so hard about it because like you said, it's kind of out in the world already, even though today is the official day.
Right. And yeah, I can relate too. Cause like, of course, like you love all your characters and you love all your books, but like I've written, like 3 books since then. And I'm like in my current thing, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that character.
Yes. Cause we're always writing, editing and promoting. Like it's always like, you've got like 3 going on at once.
Yep. Okay. So speaking of like the writing, editing, so this guy, like he's thick. I'm going to like show you guys for comparison. This is Jen's most recent. I don't know if you guys can see it in my Zoom, and this is mine. So yours is a lot thicker than mine. I was like, am I slacking? Because it's I know that's kind of our style. I write short and you write long. But so how long did this one take you? And like how much planning did you? Tell me your process for this one.
Yeah, this one was a little my romances are definitely smaller. And I usually get them done in 2 to 3 months. That's like a sweet spot for me. That's like regular writing with some disasters thrown in and weekends off. And that I'm comfortable with that. But with this one being a women's fiction book, there's 4 points of view. There's the mom's when she's 18 going through her life with her lover. And then there's the 3 sisters and they're all so different. So to be honest, I don't think I would have been able to write this book 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It was just too much of a craft monster, if that makes sense. It's kind of like I was ready for it because I feel like I have so many books behind me that I was able to kind of like train myself that I was ready, even though I was scared. And remember, I used to email you and say, I don't think I can do this. And you were like, yes, you can.
You can.
So cute. Like, you have to be yourself. Don't try to be another writer, which is what I tell the beginner writers. And then you're sitting there like taking me, off the cliff. So I love that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and because it is hard, it's different. Like it's one thing, I think, offering advice when you're not like actively working on a book and you have some distance and you're like, yeah, of course. Like you get some distance and you use your voice, but when you're actually like in the weeds, especially, and this sounds like it was a passion project for you.
It was. It definitely
so that
took about 6 to 7 months, which is a very long time for me. I took my time, went on the research, talked to a lot of people living in Positano, blogging from Positano, looking through pictures, Google Earth, restaurant menus, actual hikes on YouTube. I really felt like I needed to know every inch of the terrain and the culture there so I can write it authentically. Even though I've been there before, I just felt like you really need this story. You needed to be immersed in Positano. That was almost my other character. The setting in here is so important. Sometimes setting is a background and it's fun, like a small town, quirky neighbors. But I felt with Positano, it was the backdrop of the siblings and the sisters really discovering who they were with each other and themselves. And there's this scene in the book that I love. There's this hike. It's a famous hike called the Path of the Gods. It's a really long hike, miles and miles up, and then you've got to come down. And I have this, the hike is being mirrored as the sister is going through almost like a crisis of conscience, thinking about her husband. And she's the one, my oldest sibling. When somebody asks you, how are you doing? She's it's fine. I'm fine. She just like keeps everything in. And so during the hike, her sisters challenged her and said, we're so tired of hearing fine. Like, tell us who you are and what is happening.
Right, like what's the real story?
Yeah. What's the real story? And so she explodes and lets all this out during her hike, and the hike kind of propels her forward. And by the time the hike is over, there's like she's come to a new conclusion about what she needs to do, and she's a little bit closer with her sisters. So I really like to do that, kind of like mirror a scene with a growth moment, an arc moment. Can you relate to that? I know you can, with like your characters, like certain things.
I do a little bit, but again, in the same way, like my book is this big and your book is this big. I'm like, I don't think I'm that deep. No, but no, it is true. There is something, like a place that's important to the character. Yeah. I think like, I don't even realize sometimes until I'm writing it, like that's pivotal. Like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, like this is actually very like symbolic, or it's the theme of the story is coming home or coming full circle.
Yeah.
So you've said you've been, do you think it would be different, like now that you've written this,
Yeah.
going next time you go, if you go, do you think it'll be different? Or are you like nervous about that, having written this book?
It would be very different. I don't think I'd be nervous because I know it would be everything I dreamed it to be. I mean, I've been to the Amalfi Coast before, Capri and Sorrento and different. I haven't been in Positano, but from all of my research and everything, I feel like when I get to go, it's going to be kind of like coming to a second home because I've lived with it for so long, like as a character. So I'm excited one day to go back. I miss Italy so much. I miss so much travel.
Well, and hopefully, I mean, like knock on wood, things will be opening up. So hopefully you'll get better. Because yeah, you always just light up when you talk about it. Like I love hearing that. I wish I was Italian, not Italian. I think that would be, it's just such like a warm culture, and the food and the wine. Well, I'm just checking here to make sure we don't have any. Oh, Christy's on. Hi, Christy.
Oh, yay. That's my lovely editor, our editor.
Seeing you if you have any more questions. Okay, so we're gonna question. So it means I can keep badgering you about this. Anthony's asked me a question that I'm not. Anthony's my husband, and Anthony's on the chat asking questions about deer, which Probst.
He's such a great moderator. We love him too.
He was a trooper for us as he listened to us chat about writing.
Yes.
Okay, but speaking of that, so going back to your process, because I love talking about process.
Yes.
I'm going to interrogate you intensely on this. But so you said you had all the notes, and you obviously have these multiple subplots. Do you write them on paper? Do you have like a binder? Do you have like a Word document? How do you keep track of all of those elements?
If I was advising any other writer, I would say do not do it like I do, because I know, Lauren, I know you are so much more organized than me. And I have always wanted to be that person, because I think that it would be just a tiny bit easier for me, because I kind of just like, I have a brief idea of who the characters are and like who the siblings were. And I use a Word document. I just go into the Word document and I kind of write out the blurb and each of the characters and maybe like some scenes if I'm seeing them, which this book, I didn't see a lot of scenes. I had to kind of like write every day to get there to like different things. It was almost like figuring out what happens as I write. But I don't do series Bible, and I've always wanted to do that. So when you get to the end of the book, you probably know you forget from the beginning, and then like eye colors changed, hairs changed.
I was just saying, like, do you forget eye color? I feel so guilty sometimes. I even got a question the other day from a reader, and it's like, what color are Julie's eyes from like a book that I wrote like a decade ago? And I'm like, I have no idea. Not only did I not remember, I started going through a book. I don't even think I put it in there. And I think it's because I know that like, I will like forget or like change. I'm like, I'll just call them like light, or like she's brunette. That's all you need to know.
It's so, and I love it because, and my editor is on and she knows she calls them my Probstisms, where I will use a word so many times, you have to use a find and search. Like one of my favorite ones, this is ridiculous, you have to give me one of yours, is pure innocent. She looked up with a pure longing, pure this, pure that. I guess I'm trying to really slam that idea home. And so I have 300 pures in front of these adjectives. It's like writing 101 that you should not do. But it's, again, during the first draft, it doesn't matter. Like you have to kind of like get through that. So I'm really show up, do a really loose outline, and the book is written as I show up every day. So now you have to tell me about your process, because I know it's different.
It is different.
I'm fascinated with it too. And I think if you're a writer, you can ask 300 people and never get bored about hearing their process.
Well, it's true. And the thing that's most surprising to me is because I do tend to be fairly organized, but it's never the same from book to book. And that always baffles me, because I always thought when I started out doing this, 10 years ago, that you would figure out the process and then it would be almost like a formula that you could then apply to every book. And it doesn't work that way. At least for me, it hasn't at all. It's, you do one book that's like, I have a series Bible, and I sometimes will do like spreadsheets I'm very different from you. Like, and I have like databases and it's organized, and other ones is like a sticky note that is like, is she blonde? And that's like the extent of my notes. So yeah, it varies. I do tend to be organized, but yeah, but I've never done anything like this that has this many like settings and characters. Cause that I think I probably would bring out the spreadsheet, just, keep it straight in my mind a little bit.
Which I should have. And it's interesting that you write them all differently. I will say I've always been a brief blurb and then show up and do. I love to take notes and everything, but they end up, like you said, like all kind of like I'm grabbing the first piece of paper I have and putting down a link or putting in that. And then when I'm writing the book, I just never seem to get to that point where I go, I'm going to put all of this in a nice, neat spreadsheet and it just never happened. And so when the book is done, there's like 3,000 little sticky notes everywhere. It's crazy.
Yep. And I think every book, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do my own style sheet this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people who are not writers, the style sheet is where you put like all the proper nouns and the things like eye color and like locations. And I said a lot of stuff here, like in New York City. So it's like, this was at like 42nd and 10th, or this was on, 38th. I'm like, I'm going to write it down, and it lasts for about one chapter, maybe one page. And I'm like, where's my style sheet? And I'm like, oh, it was like 3 months old.
I love to know that about you. See, I thought you were like doing it. And do you remember the story? I forgot what series it was. I thought it was so interesting. You said that the first two books, I think you were writing third person POV. And then the third book, you were emailing me and you're like, Jen, it's first person point of view. What am I doing? Like I thought that was so interesting that you were so deep. You just had to follow what it was right for the book.
Yeah. Is like point of view is, I don't know if you feel the same, because you usually write in third, right?
Yeah. I like third.
And like I've written in both, and the thing is, like, readers feel like very, very, I don't know if you get this, my readers feel strongly like they really like, you should only write in third, or you should only write in first. And sometimes like it's like within the same half hour I get like these very like angry, like, how dare you, like, you switch on like this one. But I don't realize, like, I never set out to write in third or first. It's just however the story comes out. And yeah, it was 21 Wall Street series where I'd written the first two first person, and then all of a sudden I think it was like a third of the way done on book 3, and I'm like, oh, like this is, it didn't work in first person. Apparently, I wrote it in third. So
yeah, and yes, readers are really passionate about point of view. You're right. I'll see a post, I will never pick up a third person, or I despise first person POV, and you're just kind of like, oh darn, I just wrote this one.
No, like, oh, it's done. So sorry,
not much you're gonna do.
Okay, so let me ask this, and I haven't read this yet, and I know this is women's fiction and not romance, so it's a little bit different. But do you ever write a romance that doesn't have the guy's point of view in it? And if so, do readers get as mad at you as they do at me for that?
Every single one of my romance has the guy's point of view, has the hero's point of view.
Okay.
I am just passionate sometimes I'm more passionate about the male point of view than the female, just because it's endlessly fascinating that the same thing can happen and the female sees it this way. And then when I flip the scene, I get to show how different the male perspective is. So I feel like it's definitely a little bit richer for me. But in The Secret Love Letters of Olivia Moretti, there's the man that she falls in love with, and they write letters through Italy and through as they get older. Yes, it's very romantic. And so you never get his perspective. You only get the woman's perspective. So again, that was a nice change of pace, because the reader will never really know, what he was thinking throughout that, only what I get to filter. So it's definitely fun like that.
It is fun. And like, I definitely see both sides, because I understand sometimes when I get these very angry messages, like, we don't know what the guy was thinking. And I'm like, I get that. But like, I always think of Pride and Prejudice, right? You have Mr. Darcy, and what makes Mr. Darcy so darn sexy is you don't get into his head. So like, when he has that surprise marriage proposal, the reader or the viewer, if you're watching the movie, you're as surprised as Elizabeth.
Yes.
So I kind of love playing around with that. And I was curious what you did in this one with so many female characters.
Yeah, I think definitely the story would call for, I like the idea of cutting out the male perspective for the mystery of it. And you're right, it wouldn't be the same story with Mr. Darcy's POV. It just
Exactly.
is powerful. So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna scan here.
Okay, babe.
For questions. Dun, 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 dun. Christy is a shared editor of ours, and Christy knows because she's one where I'm like, I wrote this one in third person. But one thing that Christy does so well is sometimes if a scene is just, it feels like a little bit flat, she'll suggest, what if you flipped this point of view? So like, what if this scene was written from his perspective? Or even sometimes I'm like, oh no, it's great. And she's like, nope, write it from his perspective. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Because like point of view can be so important, so pivotal.
Yeah.
Sorry, Probst. I'm just, technology.
I'm totally relaxed.
All right. So Marilyn said it is surprising that you don't plan POV in advance, but yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff though with writing where you actually want to have a plan, and in your head you have a plan, and you don't realize until you're kind of in the weeds of it. The same thing with like the style sheet, like I was saying, I always mean to do it, but that's almost where the magic is, when it feels like it's something that's like over here, like you're not totally in control. The muse, whatever. Like,
your way through it. Yeah, like sometimes it's like that. I think that's what I love so much about it. It's that extra mystery. It's the magic. It's you never know where you were. Like you're struggling with a scene, and then all of a sudden, like 2 hours later, you're looking and you're just exactly where you wanted to be, and you don't know how you got there. Or even better, when your unconscious has been seeding things that happen with this. Throughout the book, I had to kind of like seed clues so the sisters can figure out who the secret lover was. They only knew him as R. So these characters would spring up and they would think that that was the person and that was the person. And I was seeding things. And when I got like towards the end, I saw how things came together, but I wasn't consciously writing it like that. But then when I looked back, I was like, I did it anyway. To me, that's just magic. I love it.
Yeah, I can relate so much, because it seems like pretty much every book, or at least every other book, you'd be going along with the first draft, and first drafts are always messy, as we know. They're kind of just like this hodgepodge of like, like, I feel like I'm just holding on, trying to like get down whatever the story is. But yeah, sometimes you'll get to like the ending scene, or for me, a lot of times it's the epilogue, and it'll be like an element or like a theme or like a phrase that is a direct echo of something that happened in chapter 1.
Yes.
And I had no idea. And it really does feel like magic, or like there is like some fairy that's out there that's controlling. I'm like, I had no idea. Like I never planned it, like that it came full circle, but some part of me knows, or some external force knows, which I think is just the coolest.
I love that.
Okay. So Marilyn is saying, Jennifer, can you talk more about first person research? And what are the interviews that you do? And do you have any leftover material for another book?
Oh, that's great. Well, it was nice. What I did is, the internet is so wonderful. I mean, I think about when I first started out and there was no internet, and there was only like going into the library and the Dewey Decimal System and trying to like find things. It would be so much harder to figure out how Positano really was. But there's a lot of bloggers that actually moved from the States to the Amalfi Coast, and they do blog posts about their day-to-day life, and they put up pictures and everything. I was in contact with them. My agent and a very close friend had been there. And so they were able to like tell me restaurants and what they ate at and where they walked and what they did, and then send me their personal pictures that I could really study. And then YouTube was amazing, because like there were certain hikes and certain churches that everything is filmed for you. I mean, there was this wonderful video where a couple just said, okay, we're at the top of Positano, gave the thing and videoed the entire way down. So it's like I could see exactly through the camera's view like I was there. So a lot of that all came together, a lot of reading, just everything that I could get that could soak up the atmosphere for me. That was the first half of the leftover material. This is my second book in Italy, because Our Italian Summer was about a tour. a 3-week tour through Italy, and I hit like all the hot spots like Rome and Florence and Capri. This one just takes place in Positano. And the one that I'm going to be working on next is called A Wedding in Lake Como. So we're going to go over to Lake Como, and I'm going to set the book there. There are probably a couple of other areas, but
Fun.
yeah, I can't wait to get into that.
I love that. Okay, and then now Tara would like to know, who's your favorite character to write in this novel?
Oh, from this one, they were all so different. I think my favorite in this one was the mom. I loved writing about the mom because we started with the mom when she was 18, and we see her love interest, and then what happens in life when two people who are in love and kind of like very isolated, when they start growing up and life kind of intercedes, like she goes to college and he's still in Positano, and they have this long distance relationship, and she discovers all these other hidden parts of herself as she gets older. She wants to work at an art gallery, and she loves New York City, and she's not, and then another man kind of steps into her life, and there's these hard choices that we make. And I also believe that we can be passionately in love with somebody, but it's wrong timing. And I think we can also choose to love somebody when it's right timing. And so as she gets older, she experiences all these ups and downs. She has her children. There's a part when she goes back and she does see her lover again, and she has to make another choice if she's going to continue with him or not. It's a true love story that follows the life of somebody and their choices. And it really digs deep into the mom. The mom has to make decisions over her own choices or her children's. And I think that's a really interesting thing to reflect on and dive in. I know as a mom, like, there's certain things that you do for your children that would put your own happiness like to the side. Is that right? Is that wrong? It's not either or, it's just your choice.
Yeah, it's human.
It's human.
Yeah.
And so that's really explored in the book. There's not really anything neat and tidy about it. And I think that's what I love. There's a lot of raw edges. And the other part is the siblings not knowing who their mom really was and discovering that it's not just mom. It's not just this role of a mom. Like we like to put our moms on a pedestal. Like,
Right.
you know, they've never had sex other than for us. They've never done this. They've never done that. There's a purity of that, which is fine. That's, you know, human.
Purity.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's a purity. Oh my goodness, I'm so done. My editor saw it.
Love it.
Yeah, so you never know. And kind of like investigating that, I thought it was a lot of fun. Like, what would you do if you found out your mom who thought you knew had this secret life and you had to figure it out? Would that challenge all the ideas that you had of being a mom or her as a mom? Would you judge her? So all those questions are kind of in the book. So going back to the original question, that is why I loved Olivia, the mom's point of view, the most, because I think she had the most change.
I love that. Okay, so now I'm gonna ask a question related to that, and I hope you don't hate this question. You're not gonna yell at me later. But so this
Silently, the silent text. What did you do?
Why'd you put me on the spot? But so this is women's fiction.
Yes.
Right. And I know that your start is in romance, and you're still also writing romance. Is it hard to shift between the two? Like if you've written so many love stories, and this is obviously a different type of love story, is that, like, did you have to kind of change your thinking? Was it something you were excited about? Was it intimidating? Do you want to keep doing it? Tell me about the two genres.
Yes, I think it came at the right time because I was writing romance the majority of my career, and my first women's fiction book was out a year ago. So that's really when I started diving into it. I love going back to romance. Romance is, okay, are you ready? It's pure.
Right.
No, it's something very comforting to me. I love stripping down a story, and I know you understand this, to just the hero and the heroine and the love and the relationship, and just having that be the central focus of everything. I just think it kind of lets me dive deeper into that. So going to these women's fiction books, I need much more time to write them. There's different points of view. The romance takes a very backseat, like it's a very minor. It's how it relates to the woman's journey rather than the romance itself being front and center. So I'm getting into a really nice flow where I can write a women's fiction book and then go back, take a break, and then go write a romance, usually 2 romances, and then write a women's fiction book. So the women's fiction book has to come a little bit slower because it needs more time to simmer in the pot. And the romance novels, I still have a million ideas for different series I can always dive in. I just don't think that I'll ever have enough of those.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. And I haven't written like a true women's fiction yet, but I can imagine it'd be much more complicated, because one thing that happens a lot with romance, and I know you've heard this too, is the critics say like, oh, they're really formulaic. And I'd be like, yeah, but I'm like, that's also kind of like the fact that we know what's going to happen, like that's part of the appeal, but that's also, I think, where the craft comes in a little bit.
Yes.
The love story is like, okay, so yeah, we've all written something about like 2 best friends falling in love, or a second chance romance, or Amnesia, my favorite. Like we've all like read those. But yeah, it's like, how can I make this fresh? How can I make it different? But yeah, women's fiction would be a whole other. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I'm impressed because it's a whole other beast that you've taken on.
Well, it was nice because I was able to kind of play a little bit. I was able to like make it not so neat and tidy, and that was nice. But what aggravates me is that romance is genre fiction, like science fiction, like horror, like dystopian, like, and there's certain, not just the tropes, but there's certain expectations when you're reading a science fiction book, it's going to have certain elements, but within the elements, and our element is a happy ever after, but within that, you can torture the reader. There's so many things that you can write about that is really messy and truthful. But I think what we give our readers is a way to experience that kind of pain and fear and growth, and know that you're going to be caught at the end. That it's like going on a roller coaster when though, you're going to be safe. So it's that,
that's
right?
a great description. Yep.
Yeah. And so I think we just the critics hit us really hard with that, thinking that everything is like formula, but no, it's just you're guaranteeing a happy ever after in romance. That's really all that's in there. Everything else you can kind of play with and bring your own perspective with. And it just, I don't know, that's like a hot spot of mine, especially in my career.
I love that I stepped on it back. Yeah, no, I feel kind of the same.
Yeah, like, oh, must be fun to just like write. And I'm like,
Well, especially because usually it comes from people that have not written one. So you're like, you know what? You sit down and you do this and you tell me how formulaic it is.
That's exactly. So, yeah.
Okay, so tell me, so you're writing a romance now, right?
Yes.
This is what you're in the midst of. Yes. When you switch gears to like release day, do you stop? This is going to be a very specific question, but I'm asking as a friend because I want to know.
I love
do
that.
You like for release week or like release month, do you stop writing whatever you're writing now so that you can focus on the book that's coming out and kind of go into like the marketing mindset, or do you keep going on the craft side knowing that it's something that's not going to come out for a year? Does that make sense?
That is such a great question because it's changed for me. Before, I would be promoting a book and still writing the other one, and I would just kind of multitask and do whatever I need to do. I'm getting older. I like to focus. I feel like my focus is better if I'm just doing like one project at a time. So this is really the first time that I put aside the book that I'm working on for a little while. And I'm really enjoying on just focusing on the promotion and giving this new book like as much publicity and opportunities, let's say, to reach readers. And I feel much better that way. I feel less scattered. I feel less stressed. I feel like, okay, if I'm working on this, on a blog post or a podcast, I'm not in the back of my head going, I've got to write 2,000 words today, or I have to do that. I can just really enjoy, the promotion part. And I think that writers are starting to get a little burnt out with so much on their plate. And I think some more people are starting to do that. Aren't you? Don't you kind of agree? Like focusing like less on everything all at once now, pulling back just a tiny bit?
Yeah, so I do on that. The one thing I will say, and this, like, I've almost been, I think, the opposite of you in terms of directions. Because I used to be, a book would come out and I would be full on, like marketing mode, publicity mode. And I do still try to do that. Because like you said, every book that comes out, I want to give my full attention. Like I gave like my entire heart to that book. I want to make sure that those characters get their moment. But one thing that I have found to be a little bit grounding, because you can get so lost in release day, like with, like reviews and how is sales rank, and then you get sales numbers. And, and if it's not doing as well as you want, or maybe you have expectation, it's not meeting it, you feel defeated. One thing that I always do, and even if it's just like 10 words, I always do try to write on release day, because it reminds me it's not about the performance of the book, and it's not about, like the reception even of the book. It's about creating stories. So I do always try to do a little bit of writing on release day.
I love that though. That's different though. You don't put pressure to like, I've got to write this chapter.
No.
That this is what it's really about. You're right. You can't get like trapped in it. I've started to step away from all of that stuff with like the algorithms and the rankings and the reviews. I just kind of want to be on for the readers who want to talk to me and stuff like that, and not worry about a new project. But I love that.
Yeah, it is nice. And like, sometimes it is like, I will literally say like, you just have to write 10 words, but there's something about, like opening up the manuscript and writing just a sentence and remembering like, okay, first and foremost, we are storytellers.
Yeah.
And it helps when you get swept up in like the interviews and like these wonderful things too, of just remembering.
Really good advice. Really good advice.
Hopefully. So hopefully I didn't lead anyone astray. Any newbie writers, take this with a grain of salt. So again, asking as a friend who's genuinely curious, do you read reviews, or are you one of those authors that avoids them like the plague?
I really try to avoid them, Lauren. I really do, because I know I'm not expecting everybody to love the book. I just don't want somebody to tag me on a 1-star review. And then, because I still am human, and you put so much in the book that it just kind of gets in there, and it can kind of like mess with your new writing. Like, okay, I'm writing this book, and in the back of my mind, it's like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because everybody hated my book. And there's not everybody. There's just that one. There's like 10 great reviews, and maybe just that one that kind of like hits you, off the thing. So I don't go diving in and looking. Usually the first week, I will say the ones that tag me are usually nice reviews. I'll click on 1 or 2 to thank them. That's it. Then I kind of step away, because it's not I put it out there, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. So it's just kind of like, whatever, tear it up, like it, don't, whatever. It's kind of not my business anymore, but that creative thing, just need to protect it a little bit. So I kind of like to push it off to the side. So
yeah, I am totally the same way. I used to read reviews like all the time. When you're first starting out, and you're so excited, and then the first one you get like a 1-star or 2-star, or like just something that's like savage. It feels, I don't think people that haven't done it know, it feels like someone kicks you in the stomach.
Yes.
And
exactly right.
And like, I know that we're supposed to have like a thick skin and like all of that, but I'm like, it's difficult. And not that I think that everybody should love every book.
Yeah.
I don't need everybody to get 5-star. I'm like, I just don't always need to know about it,
Yes. Yes. And certain reviews are like, I really get like, somebody says, I didn't like it because of this. And then I go, yeah, I get that, but I know another reader would like that. It's the ones that, which will come once in a while, just one that are kind of gleeful, very gleefully like, and you kind of get that like, oh, what's going on? But going back, remember when we first started, I would want to comment on those reviews and try to explain my position. I want to say, no. If you understood what I wanted from this scene, you wouldn't hate it. And then of course, everybody was like, do not touch the review, do not comment, do not reply. Like, I feel like I would go to jail if I tried to reply to the review.
I feel like that should be a requirement though. Like if you want to become a published author, like you have to sign a contract that you will never reply to a negative review because it never goes well. It's never going to like play out like you think it will. Like no reviewers can be like, oh, you're right. This is actually a 5-star read after all. Let me go revise it. But like, yeah, in your head, because you feel so like nobody feels as strongly about your book as you do. So yeah, that knee-jerk reaction, I get that.
It's so funny. We need to do a boot camp for the new authors because I would have loved to hear that at first. Like, don't do this, don't do that. It's just better for you.
Well, yeah, it's like sometimes I get asked like, oh, do you read reviews or can you learn from them? And I do think there are plenty of authors that do learn from reviews. I feel like maybe I don't as much only because that book is done. And we've talked about this a little bit too, but I'm like, this book that I wrote a year ago, if somebody doesn't like this particular element, like there's nothing I can do to fix it because the book is done, but it's also for me, it's irrelevant for the book that I'm working on now or the books that are coming up because they're just, each one is its own beast, its own element. Definitely.
So that's exactly right.
All right, so hold on, see if there's any other questions. So can you talk about beta readers? Is that different than random reviewers for you? Do you have beta readers?
I don't have beta readers. I was going to ask you if you do. So many authors I know do. And a beta reader is somebody that you trust that loves your work, that will look at the book first to kind of just give you feedback. This is working for me. That's not working for me. It's not an editor. They don't go in deep. They kind of give an overall feeling of this was confusing. Like, and I think sometimes that it would really help. I just haven't really cultivated any close beta readers. And I'm also kind of a lone wolf. I'm just very like in my story alone. And when it's ready, I'm just ready to get it ravaged by an editor. I'm like, go for it. Yeah. Do you use any?
No, I don't. I'm like almost what you said is like verbatim. Yeah, I haven't. And I don't know that I will just because I am a lone wolf and I have this vision of what I want the story to be. And also though, I think like you and I have been really lucky, like we trust our editors. Yeah. And I think maybe it would be different if I had an editor, maybe like if the editor's feedback came back and I wasn't quite clicking with it, then maybe I would, want a second opinion or like kind of like play the field a little bit and see like, am I nuts on this? But yeah, when I trust my own instincts and I trust my editor's instincts, that's, and plus I also think it would be tricky too, because what if you have two beta readers and they have different opinions?
Yeah.
Some authors I think handle that marvelously. I don't know that I would. I think
I'm just like you. I'm just like you. I totally respect it. And it goes with what an author feels comfortable with. I just never, I don't think I would start it now, like you said, unless there was an issue with the editor, and we were very blessed. Like I've had no issue with that. It's been helpful.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So I already interrogated you about your release week schedule, but so like if your ideal schedule, when you're not stressed out, if it was just sort of like your happy zone for writing, would you write every day, or would you be more of a binge writer, if you will, where you would write it all at once? Like what's your dream scenario? And let's pretend, right, that you have no other obligations.
Well, I've always liked the idea of steady writing, like 2,000 words a day, like just try to hit it, because then you always have something in the hopper. You're always working towards something. But I will say for the very first time that I wouldn't mind trying it the other way. I was listening to Colleen Hoover talk, who is of course a goddess. I mean, look at her. And she was amazing in this talk. I did not know this about her. She is even more magical than I thought. She writes when she wants to write. She says that she doesn't put herself on deadlines. She writes when she wants to write. And she is like a binge writer. She's like, if I'm in the mood and I know this is my story, I'll just write. And she could write for hours and hours. And then when she doesn't want to write, she doesn't want to write. And for so long, I didn't really question it, because in my life, it has to be a habit. It has to be like a full-time job. I have to like get it in, or I won't get everything out that I want to accomplish. But I will say, Lauren, if I had the opportunity, I would love to try that and see what it would be like. Like I would just like take a year and say, I'm binging, like what's going to happen this year? It would be so cool to figure out, would I write something in a month? Would I take 8 months? Would I write 3 books that year? Like what would happen?
Well,
So
and who knows, like even like genres too, like who knows if all of a
yeah,
sudden, if you wrote just when you wanted to write, if you have an like inspiration for like a,
yeah,
suspense or sci-fi or whatever.
yeah.
Maybe
Nobody's
you
like
should do
looking for
that.
anything. Yeah, I could see you totally thriving with that. Like you come up with, you'd be like, okay, Jen, I wrote a historical, I wrote a memoir, I wrote this. I'd be like, what?
what what happened to Layne? Where'd she go? No, I do like, I will say like I am a little bit, I'm not Colleen Hoover, but I tend to have a little bit more of that rhythm. But for me, and this is why I think you should try it, for me, the second I tell myself, like, Lauren, you don't have to write, you can take time off. You know, feel like the second I tell myself that, guaranteed the next day I will have some like nuts. I'm writing a story right now, Probst, about a helicopter crash in like the middle of nowhere, and it's like a mystery and there's like guns, that like
This is not you.
no, it's not me, but it was because I gave myself permission. I'm like, you know what, I'm not gonna write, like I've got a little gap. So yeah, this is what I think you should try it. I would love to see what comes out.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
Because I don't think it's you, but it is you, or because you wouldn't be writing it if it wasn't you.
well, because it's almost like we talk about this like magical force and this muse. I think there is like the second you give your brain a little bit of room and a
Yeah.
little bit of like space, and if you can just step away from whatever story that you're working on, it's like there are other things up there up there up in
Yeah.
our heads like
Yeah.
that we don't even know that are lurking, waiting to come onto the page.
Yeah.
So
I love that. That's what I love about this career so much.
I do too. Well, like I said, and I think we're kind of in the same boat here. It's just no book is the same, and that's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
so cool to me. Even though I wish, like, for the sake of aspiring writers, and I know we both really, really love to like give back to that community. Don't you
Yeah.
always feel sometimes when they like ask for advice, and
Oh,
like I've been like so confident in the advice that I've given, and it's like on this one book, and then someone will say like, well, Lauren, you said like in this talk back in 2016 that you did this, and you're like, oh yeah, well, I don't do that anymore, but you should do it if it works for you.
I
And
love it. I feel sometimes such a hypocrite because I wrote that nonfiction book, 2 nonfiction books on writing. And sometimes I'm in the kitchen with my husband and he's like, you wrote a book on writing? And I was like, be quiet.
yes, I
Do as
did.
do as I say, not as I do. Don't you know this by now?
It's true. Although, and we both love studying craft. Like I know this. And sometimes I think it's just learning what somebody else does, even if it's not what they're going to do for the end of time. We need to like snap out of those little grooves that we get in where like you have to do it this way or you have to follow this formula.
Yes.
And yeah, like it's just, I think that's what makes writing interesting, is when we do allow ourselves to
Yes,
to
definitely.
branch out.
Definitely. And I can see how it changed. I used to be a very linear writer. There would be absolutely no rhyme or reason to like skip around. It was like chapter 1 through whatever. And now if I come up with a scene or I'm seeing something, I'll just jump around. I'll like literally write a scene and tuck it at the end of the manuscript and say, when it comes, it comes. But it's like, if that scene was burning in my mind, I'll write it now. I would have died like 2-3 years ago. I would have said, I would have never done that. But it's,
that's so interesting. I have never done that. And I think I'm waiting for that moment where I have a scene that I'm so excited about. I'm still so linear.
yeah,
Like,
no, it's weird because all of a sudden I'm like, okay, and I'm writing these big scenes and I don't know where they fit in the book because I'm not there yet, but I just tuck them at the end. And it's so nice when I get to the point where it's time for that scene, I plop it in and then I'm already kind of ahead of it emotionally. And then I get to kind of tweak it. So really weird. I'm still learning different things.
that is, yeah, like I said, I'm excited for that to happen, because mine is like, if I get to a point, I don't know what happens next, I'm like, well, I'm just not going to write anymore. Cause like, I can't, I get very, very stuck. So does it ever happen for you, if you're writing, do you ever though get like a scene idea or like a vision? Like, does the muse strike that's for a different story? Do you ever like pause what you're writing on now to go jot down something else, a different story?
It happens all the time, but I will write like a 1-sentence thing, like book about this or story about this. And then no, I won't, because I am terrified that my muse would like to have lots of affairs. and just kind of dump the book and be like, let's like look at the shiny object, you know,
Yeah, it's true. Because the new ideas are seductive.
they're like
Right?
really hot, like the pool
Yeah.
hot, like,
And they
okay, let's get down with it. And then my awesome husband is there going, you have to finish.
Yeah, and the new ideas whisper, like the new ideas always promise that they're going to be easier than
Yes.
whatever you're writing now,
Yes.
and that they're going to be better, and that they're going to sell better. And you're like, well, of course, I should just
Yes.
stop whatever I'm doing now.
Yes.
Which
So
is
I'm always afraid. Like if I go there, I may never come back. And then there goes, you know, my deadline. So I just kind of like wait. And I'm also a big proponent of the right time. Like the story is maybe needs to bubble and it's just the right time for it. And then I'll come and write it. It's kind of like I just put it there. Have you done that? Have you stopped to like write something else?
never. I'm like you. Never the full, like I never completely abandoned one book to work on another, partially because of deadlines, and it's a day job. It is like I love it, but it's like, you know, you do have a deadline, and if you want to finish a book, you have to finish the book. I will definitely like stop, and every now and then, if an idea I love so much, I'll write like the first 3 chapters, and I'll at least just send it to my agent. And if she thinks it's something, if she wants to put on submission, you know, she can do that, but never more than 3 chapters, because otherwise I would just have like, you know, like a quarter of a book all over the place.
But I love that you write the 3 chapters, because it's just enough to know, like, have the story simmering, have a good starting place. I really like that. And then when you go back to it, you already have a chunk in, like you're not starting from square zero. So
exactly. And there's something too about like the 3 chapter mark for me, where those are always fairly easy.
Yes.
And so once I do that, I'm like, oh, it's easy. And then I pretty quickly learn like, oh yeah, this story is not that much easier than what I write now. It's just that the first 3 chapters are easy. So yeah, I've kind of learned to like hack my own system.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say we only have 4 minutes left. If anybody has any more questions, let me, you know, hit us up. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep asking pros. So one more question. This is actually 2 parts. One, how do you keep track of future book ideas? And also, how many do you think you have? How many book ideas do you have that you haven't written yet?
I think I have endless. I have endless ones. Some are written down and some are just like tucked back there. And I know this because when I was in Maine, I had this tour guide that my husband's like, oh God, are you doing it again? I was just like, oh my gosh, he would be like the perfect hero for this. And I'd set this up here. And my mind was going, and I had a series right there from Maine, Portland. So it's just always there ready to connect. It's just a matter of what do I feel like writing next, what I'm the most passionate about. And also in between deadlines, what can I have fun writing from? I have ideas for a children's book. I have this wonderful idea for a rescue dog book in the rescue dog's point of view. I have just so many different, like a whole bunch of different short stories, different romances. So that I don't think is ever going to end. And I don't really keep track of them very well. I just have like on a notebook, okay, this is an idea, this is a title, and then I let it go. I kind of go on trust. Like if that was meant to be written, you know, Big Magic by I really feel that way. Like if that is meant to be my book or my story, it's going to circle back and I'm not going to be able to let go of it. And then I'm going to know it's my time. So I'm kind of loosey-goosey about it. I know some writers like keep a dream book. They have detailed journals. Do you do that? Like you have like an idea journal?
I don't like, I love the idea of an idea journal like that. Because I do have, I think most of us do, like some of the ideas do come late at night.
Yeah.
You know, like at 3 a.m. or first thing you wake up, I'm like, oh, that's something.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm kind of I'm a blend of writing it down and what you said of, I do have a notebook. If there's a really strong idea, I'll write it down. And I probably have 20 or so that are like, I think I might get to these. I have 20 ideas and 5 I'm pretty sure I'm going to get to. But I think some just stick with you. And there's been a couple books, you know, like I wrote down, Made in Manhattan actually is one. I wrote that down years ago and it just kept bubbling up. You know, I've got this long list and that's one that I'm like, nope, I want to write it. I want to write it. And others, you know, they come and they seem so hot, right? They're like whispering and they're like,
yeah.
You know,
and then they cool down.
Yeah.
You're so like me. We really do have a lot in common. If I could get organized, we could be like completely.
If we just blend our approaches, we'd be like masterpieces everywhere.
We'll take over the world, Layne. We'll take it over.
Okay. Jill says she loves the idea of a book told from Rescue Dog's point of view. So please write that.
That will come one day. Whenever I've wanted to write that since for years, but it's just not the right time. But I know when I sit down to do it, everything is gonna fall into place.
Yeah, and those are sometimes the best ones too, I think, is when, because you've been like in the back of your mind, even if you're not consciously paying attention, there's some part of your brain that's been chewing on that for however many years.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so it's 7:59. Anyone? I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Dun, dun, dun. I think we're good. Oh,
That.
I got so excited.
That went by so quickly, you guys. That was such a great conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I love conversation like this when we can just learn from each other and just have it so casual. I'm really appreciative, Lauren. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for, I was thrilled. Trust me, anytime I get to see my Probst is a welcome opportunity. So thank you.
And thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight and those who are watching online afterward. Make sure to pick up a copy of The Secret Love Letters of Olivia Moretti, either from Oblong, we have signed copies, or at your local independent bookstore. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.